thank you for coming and thank you for having me, and it's my privilege to be able to tell you what's happening at Santa Barbara Unified School District and probably the other districts in the county. There's 20 of them. And so I think what happens in Santa Barbara spreads. That's what people have always told me. And so I've been watching what's been happening in Santa Barbara Unified for the last 18 years. I've been teaching for 18 years. I'm also a parent. I have a daughter who's 15 and she's in high school. And I'm a United States Air Force veteran. I served during 9/11 and overseas in an aeromedical evacuation squadron. So I love helping people and serving people, and that's my heart. That's always been my heart as a teacher, and when I see something that's happening to kids, I feel a responsibility to speak up and to say what's happening and to advocate for them, and that's what I've always done, and that's what I'm continuing to do. And I don't believe in doing the same thing over and over again, expecting a different result. And so I've taken some big risks and some big steps to try to educate parents and educate the community on what's happening in the schools. And so I'm gonna start with just talking about the money, because if you follow the money, that's where you're gonna get an idea of what is running this thing. I think it's more than just money, some of it's power, but money is a big one. And in our 20 districts, there's over $1 billion. If you add up all the budgets of all 20 districts, it's over $1 billion. The County Office of Education oversees $100 million. And there's monies within the districts that are assigned to something called the LCAP, the Local Control Accountability Plan. That's about 10% of each district, and the County Office of Education has the authority to sign off on those funds and the budgets for those funds. And what I've seen as a teacher is those are the funds primarily, they are set aside for foster youth, for low socioeconomic, and for English language learners. And I spent 6 years teaching, well, I spent 9 years teaching at the high school, 4 years junior high, and 6 years at the elementary. And when I went to the elementary, the school was 95% English language learners, and we were constantly talking to administration about, what the kids needed, the programs that they were, having for literacy and math, and telling them it wasn't working. And they'd come and they'd talk to us, and then they'd leave and do nothing. And so I finally was like, what is going on here? We're talking about helping these kids, and it seems that these kids get stuck in the system. They can't get out of the system. And so I thought, well, there's a reason why these guys aren't learning, and there's no consistency. They're constantly changing the curriculums. And what I kind of started to realize is the longer that these kids stay at this status, the more money they get. And so I thought, okay, I get an idea what's happening here. And as I've watched these different programs come in, so back in 2005, they brought in Just Communities, which was going to address the racial issues in the district. And they sent all teachers and staff through these week-long trainings. They did professional development, every chance they got, summer programs, all kinds of stuff. And when I attended the Just Communities, it was in Montecito, had a very nice Casa de Maria, I was sitting and listening to what they were teaching us, and it was very divisive in nature. It was pitting white people against people of color. They did all these exercises, and probably one of the worst exercises they put us through was we had to sit in a circle, and in the inner circle was people of color, and in the outer circle was white people, and we had to sit and watch while the people of color wrote down all of their grievances, everything bad that has ever happened to them, and they went and stuck it on a poster board. They were angry, they were yelling, it was bringing up a lot of bad feelings, and we had to sit and watch. And I thought, this is wrong. I've never treated anybody like this, and I didn't appreciate being stuck in the category of oppressor. And so then they broke us off into rooms, and we had to go debrief, and I was very upset. I mean, I was like crawling out of my skin practically, like, this is wrong, and they were kind of looking at me and just trying to get me to shut up. But I knew it was wrong, and I've always felt it was wrong. And it wasn't until Fair Education came on the scene, and I remember sort of paying attention to them coming to school board meetings, and I thought, finally somebody who understands what's been going on for all this time. That wasn't until I think around 2018 that they started talking. So that was almost 15 years of training teachers and training staff. I was at La Patera out in Goleta, where they did a parent training. They brought parents in, and I attended that training thinking I was doing something to help my community. But it didn't feel good, and it didn't feel like it was bringing parents together out there at La Patera. And then I started noticing programs coming into the classrooms. AHA was the first one. They came into my classroom, and they would take the kids, and they would put them in little circles and talk to them about things, and I would hear them using cuss words and different things, and I thought, what are these adults doing in my class? I mean, the administrators told us we needed to do that, so we didn't generally argue with administration, but we probably should have back then. But these things have crept in very slowly, and when you don't really know the intent of, it sounds good, it sounds like, oh, these are conflict resolution skills and these different things, it sounds good, but you realize after time that this is not bringing us together, it's actually tearing us apart. They also got us trained in something called restorative approaches, which I'm a big believer in restorative approaches. I like it, it's conflict resolution skills, but I started noticing that discipline was exiting the building and everything became about restorative approaches, and kids learned quickly they could jump through the hoops and say they were sorry but never change their behavior, and there was no consequences anymore. And so I would say that what I have seen as a teacher this year is almost zero discipline in the schools. I think over the last 18 years, I've seen a decline in academics, a decline in discipline, and a decline in mental well-being of students. And the reason is because if you have to show improvement, then you have to do something to show improvement. And our school district has taken the method of showing improvement by lowering the standards. And so you can, lower the expulsion rate by raising the amount of suspensions a student can have. And you can, lower or with test scores and academics, if you alter things, then you can show improvement and not show that you're doing a bad job as a district. And so, if kids are not learning, we have 67,000 kids in our district, and over half of them are below state achievement levels. And so that's a really bad outcome for over $1 billion spent in the schools. And when kids are not learning, and they don't have hope, and they don't have a future, then their mental wellness goes down. And so they are synonymous. And when I was at McKinley the last 6 years, and I saw these kids coming into school, super excited to learn. I mean, kindergartners are the most excited kids ever to learn. They come in just so excited and happy, and they love to learn. It doesn't matter if they're special education. It doesn't matter if they have a terrible, home life. You can still make it safe for them at school, and you can give them a place that's safe and a place that gives them the structure that they need. And they'll do anything. They'll walk on water. My McKinley kids would have walked on water for me. And when I got transferred to Dos Pueblos, I noticed quickly how I had gone from this environment of excitement and the sky's the limit, to kids who are very unhappy, very confused, depressed. After COVID, I'm a physical education teacher, and when I went there, I just made it my mission to really pour into these kids, because they really needed something to help them feel better and bring their confidence back up. And they were trying so hard, and they have brightly colored hair, and they're trying to feel happy, but when they're not learning and they don't have a future or hope, they're not happy. And when there's not discipline and structure at a school, they're not happy because they feel unsafe. And that also affects their mental well-being. And so I think what I've kind of come to realize over my time is when there's a need, and I think it even started as far back as special education. If you identify kids in the special education population, you get a lot of money for that. And I saw that happen at a school that I worked at. There was, I think, 400 kids, and over 100 of them were identified special education, because they get a lot of money for that. And then they start some food programs, and when you start a food program and you say that you're meeting the needs of a population, you get a lot of money for that. But maybe you throw pennies at it, you know, and do what you want with the rest. And then, what else? English language learners, there's a lot of money in that. Critical race theory, all the racial stuff, there's a ton of money for that. Next, what's coming down the pike is something called social emotional learning. You've probably heard that term, SEL. There's $350 billion coming from the federal government for that, and schools want it. And so the bigger mental health crisis you have, the more money you can get for that program. And so when I started attending board meetings and I started listening what's happening at these board meetings, I realized there's a lot of money going to consultants and nonprofit organizations. And some of the board members sit on, they have their own consultant firms, and so somehow the money goes round and around, pennies go to the kids, and then all this money goes to consultants and nonprofits. And just some examples of that, Just Communities, when they first started their contracts with Santa Barbara Unified, they would be paid over $300,000 a year of taxpayer money. And we've been doing it, you know, all these years, and we have more racial incidents today than we've ever had. So what does that tell you? I don't think they're mitigating the problem, I think they're creating the problem. That's what I've seen. I've been on the front lines, I've seen what they do and how they handle things, and they've sort of done a reverse of what they came in to do. They've gotten kids who are being, you know, bullied or, you know, being treated a certain way. They get the good kids to, you know, suppress their feelings, and they don't get to share their feelings. But the ones who are, you know, maybe people of color, maybe, you know, something else, they're the ones that get to be loud and say that they're being treated bad and everybody else needs to be quiet. And you know, when I think we've had 12 incidents in Santa Barbara Unified over the last 2 months, and they'll say a racial incident occurred, but they won't give the races of the kids that were involved, and they want, you know, the way they spin it is white against black or white against brown, but that's not the case. And they're not saying that. They're not telling you that. That's not coming out in the newspapers. And so there's truth to what's being said, but it's usually a half-truth and it's usually twisted. And unless you know somebody who's involved where you can get first-hand information, they spin the narrative however they like. And so another example, so people started to complain that Just Communities was getting $300,000 a year and there wasn't a good outcome, and so they decided to switch it up. Let's rename it, let's call it AHA, and let's bring AHA in a different way, lunch clubs and after school clubs and mentoring clubs, and let's pitch it per school so it doesn't look like so much money. So now it's just a $100,000 contract with La Colina and a $100,000 contract with Dos Pueblos, but so they break it down into smaller numbers, but they make more contracts because there's 21 schools in the district. Okay, so but then when everybody catches on to that, then they're going to be on to the next thing. So their latest thing, we've had these 12 racial incidents over the last, 2 months, and their solution for that was to, James Joyce ran for mayor here in Santa Barbara. He lost. So he created an LLC called Coffee with a Black Guy. And he decided that he was going to come into the schools and pitch his, a bid to the school district contract, which they approved really rather quickly. And his idea was that they could pay him $8,100 for 3 90-minute sessions. And he was going to go in and talk to select students and parents. And he was going to fix the problem of racism that we had. The racial incident that occurred was 3 Hispanic children and 1 mixed African-American white child, and he was going to go in to fix that with his Coffee with a Black Guy. If you do the math, he's getting paid $1,800 an hour, and he has no credentials. 0 credentials, never worked with kids, has no experience with kids. One of our local reporters, Bonnie Donovan, did an article in the news press about 3 weeks ago, and she broke it down, and she said, if we got a black counselor, it might have been $200 or $300 an hour. If we got a black attorney, that would have been $500 or $600. If we got a black arbitrator, that would have been $1,000. If we got a black judge, that would have been $1,200. But Coffee with a Black Guy gets paid $1,800 an hour, and he has no experience whatsoever. And to me, it is just this blatant, they are gonna do what they want, and they don't care what anybody else thinks, and nobody gets to tell them no. And I believe differently. I believe that we do get to say no because that's taxpayer money, and it's supposed to be helping kids, and he has no credentials. And so what I've seen is kind of, I think, this vacuum that's been created in the County Office of Education. The superintendent, she signs off on these funds. She's the sole signer on these funds. The board doesn't even oversee these funds. She can approve or disapprove. And it's about 10% of every school's budget that is supposed to be going to help the youth that needs it the most. And it's not helping because there is not a positive outcome for those kids. And that's where they've brought in a lot of this critical race theory. You may have seen a YouTube video that I created in January where I walked parents through a teacher password protected portal, and I showed them the curriculum, called Curriculum by Santa Barbara Unified, on the website. Goes from preschool all the way to 12th grade. And it trains them in Black Lives Matter, it trains them in LGBTQIA, it trains them in Latinx. Some people do not like the term Latinx. Many of my Latina friends do not like that term because they like Latina and Latino, not Latinx. And so I think most of those people groups would actually be offended by what's on those portals. And it's not teaching about culture, because I've had a lot of people ask me, well, you don't want them to learn about culture? I absolutely want them to learn about culture, but not in a divisive way, not in a way that pits whites against blacks or any people against any other people. We need to do it in a loving way, an accepting way, but not kind of this mindset that I see. They're training them in a way of thinking. They're not teaching them about culture, they're training them in a certain way of thinking. And of all my years of teaching, I love elementary the best. It is the best place to work, and it's because you get to form a solid foundation in these kids. They're like little sponges at that age, and if you teach them things in the wrong way or wrong ways of thinking, if they think that bullying is okay, but speaking up and advocating for somebody is wrong, because that's how it's kind of being presented, then their thinking, it gets set like that. And those are really hard things to undo. And so what I see is kind of a taking over of their minds. And I can't stand by and say nothing when I see that happening, because it is a parent's job. It is a parent's job to kind of form those identities and those ways of thinking and morals and beliefs, and it is not for the school to do that. And so I think this film is going to go into way more depth than I'm kind of able to go into. But what's happening is, one of the things I've seen in the newspaper when I've seen responses to my YouTube video is that it's just a resource. They'll say it's just a resource. It's not just a resource. A district doesn't spend millions of dollars on curriculum and millions of dollars on training just to be used as a resource. It has been inundated in every staff meeting, in every, at Dos Pueblos, they brought in a student with the Gay Straight Alliance, and she did a whole training for the teachers back in February, and all the teachers were supposed to go teach pronouns. And we need to be teaching much more than pronouns. We need to be teaching adjectives and nouns and verbs, and we need to be teaching it all. And so to have an overemphasis on pronouns is not what we need to be focusing on. And so I think that there's some base things we need to get back to in our schools. Number one is transparency. We need to be showing parents what's happening. We need to be showing budgets. We need to be, if everything is on the up and up, we should have no issue showing it to anybody who wants to see it. We shouldn't have to, make a FOIA request to a district to get information from them. We should not have to go to that effort. We also need to have positive educational outcomes, and things that aren't working, we need to scrap them, and we need to bring in things that are working, and these kids need to be learning. Kids love to learn. It is the best part of being a teacher when you take a student from, you know, I had this little guy, he was in first grade, he was one of my PE students, and he hated PE. He was like, could barely make it twice around the blacktop, and he hated it, and I'm like, it's okay, Spencer, we're just gonna, he started way behind everybody else, you know? And I just had him in first grade, and I just kept helping him and, you know, encouraging him, and in second grade, he still didn't kind of like running, but he was a little bit more open to it, and I was trying to teach him to run the hurdles, to jump the hurdles, and it's the cutest thing to see little kids jumping hurdles. And Spencer was refusing not to do it. He was crying. I said, okay, come back tomorrow, Spencer, and we'll do it together. So he came back the next day. I ran the hurdles with him. And in third grade, his sister started working out, and so all of a sudden working out was important to Spencer. And he came to school one day and he said, Coach, I am gonna run the fastest mile I've ever run. I said, you go, Spencer. And he did. He ran 13 minutes. And to me, I don't care if he's a 6-minute mile runner or a 13-minute mile runner. I just want to see learning happening, because I know that he can do it, and I want him to see he can do it even when it's hard. And so I believe that kids can, you know, they will latch on. Even when I went to DP, you know, it was after the pandemic, and I mean, these kids were really depressed. They were overweight because they had been on Zoom all this time, and I just went in there and I said, you know what, safety is another thing. We need to bring back safety, and I made that classroom safe. I got rid of all the kind of nonsense, you know, nonpartisan stuff that is in the classroom. We need it to be nonpartisan. We need to just be focusing on, you know, the things that kids need to learn in school. And so I made the classroom safe. I listened to them, I worked with them, and in 12 short weeks, this class was on task. They were, you know, doing the lessons that I brought to class. They knew that if they did something wrong, I would send them to the office, or I'd call their parents, or, you know, do whatever I needed to do. And they got on board, and I had one of these 15-year-olds tell me, you're the best teacher I've ever had. I'm like, wow, that's pretty good coming from a 15-year-old in 12 weeks. But they want to learn. They want to feel good. They want to be successful. Teachers want to be successful. And I saw the union president at the school board on Tuesday, almost in tears, begging the board to do something about discipline because it's non-existent. And so, you know, there is a lot that can be done that we need to do. We need to stop making excuses for, you know, all of the reasons why things are so bad. And we need to get in there, and as parents, there's a lot of things that you can do. You know, talking to the teachers, talking to the administrators. If they make it hard to see them, then go over there to the school and walk into the office and say, I want to have a conversation about this. And it is that pressure. You know, if they can do things in kind of isolation or as a group, they'll keep doing them. But when you start pinpointing people that are doing things that they shouldn't be doing, they'll stop doing it because they don't want the light being shined on them. And so I think that it's a lot of work, but I think it's good work. And I'd rather do work that's productive and be moving in a forward direction than spinning circles and, you know, and getting caught in complaining or just, you know, feeling overwhelmed or any of those things. And so I know that there's a lot of positive, good things that can change and that we can do as a community. We can take our schools back. And so I am advocating for that. I've put myself out there to run for superintendent of schools. I believe in it so much. I was sued to get my name off the ballot. I've been written up by, you know, 2 unnamed newspapers in town that don't like that I'm running. But, you know, if it's a job that has no power and doesn't really do anything, then why are they so mad about it? And why are they coming for me so hard? I want to give you guys a little bit of time to ask some questions. So I think I'm going to close with that and open it up because I'm sure you have questions that you would like answered, and I want to give a little time for that. Santa Barbara. It's very much happening in Santa Barbara. I got out of the teachers union a year ago. I encouraged 300 of my coworkers to get out. I gave them the forms. I told them how. I told them they can sign up for other unions. And I decided, I was kind of scared to get out of the union, but I thought I should be more scared to stay in the union than to get out.
Yes.
And so I encourage them, and that's why they don't like me, is because I have stood up. There's a cost to standing up. You know, they will try to ruin your reputation, they will retaliate, they will do all kinds of stuff. I think I even have one of, are you from Dos Pueblos High School? Did you come from Dos Pueblos? I recognize you from Dos Pueblos.
Yeah, I'm just here because like I want to have some sort of oversight to what is going on in local politics.
I'm glad that you came. I'm glad that you came to hear. And I hope that you send a good message from this meeting, because there's a lot of kids out there that need a good message. And I know there's some students at Dos Pueblos, I don't know if you're part of DP, left.
Yeah, that's why I'm here today.
Okay. Well, I hope that you give an overall good message and not just, you know, put things together, because I've seen some stuff put together about me specifically, and you know, and I know the person writing the thing, and he's got it wrong. And so it's unfortunate that it's active and living and breathing in our community. And hopefully you got a different perspective coming tonight and seeing a different side of the coin. And that's what's fair about journalism or anything, is that you get both sides. So I appreciate you coming and hearing. So.